Hey, Randy Hunter here from BeginningSax.com. Now, in this jazz sax quick licks and tips video, I thought I'd talk with you about the bebop scales. Now, you've probably heard the term bebop scale, and a lot of people have learned just one bebop scale, the dominant bebop scale, the Mixolydian bebop scale. And you may realize, and you may or may not know, so let me just quickly tell you, the bebop scale is a scale. It's either a major scale, a Dorian scale, a Mixolydian scale, or really just about any kind of 7-tone scale that has an added passing tone that makes it an 8-tone scale, so that when you play the bebop scale, starting on a chord tone, each of your downbeats ends up being a chord tone if you're playing 8th notes or even if you're playing 16th notes. So it's great for creating lines that have downbeats or that have chord tones in strong rhythmic positions. So the dominant bebop scale, like I said, is probably the one that most people are familiar with. But let's go through a couple of other ones. I'd like to go through the Dorian bebop scale that's used on minor 7 chords. I'd also like to go through the dominant bebop scale or Mixolydian bebop scale that's used on dominant chords, and the major bebop scale that's used on major chords. Now, I've chosen 3 scales, 3 bebop scales from a 2-5-1 in G major. So we'll use the A Dorian bebop scale, the D Mixolydian bebop scale, and the G major bebop scale. Now, the thing about Dorian bebop scales, minor 7 bebop scales, is that the passing tone can be in a couple of different places. You can have a passing tone that's located between the 3rd and 4th tones. Now, if you don't know the Dorian, the Mixolydian scales, do your homework. I've got a video called 2-5-1s Made Easy that'll help you learn about these different scales. So be sure to do your homework, because I don't want to go through all these different scales right now. So I'm just going to play a Dorian scale for you. Now, one of the places you can have the passing tone is between the 3rd and 4th tones. So I played A, B, C, and now I'm going to put the passing tone C sharp between the C and the D. Since C is the 3rd tone, D is the 4th tone. So there you hear the passing tone. Now the complete scale. Now, there's a scale that I like to call the alternate Dorian bebop scale that has the passing tone between the 7th and 8th tones, and that's the one I really love this scale. So there, if you count up the tones in the Dorian scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you'll find G is 7, and of course A is 8. So the G sharp is the passing tone there. Now, the Mixolydian bebop scale, the dominant bebop scale, has a passing tone between the 7th and 8th tones. Now, in the 2-5-1 in G major, remember A is your 2 chord. That's when we use the Dorian scale on that one. D is your 5 chord, which the Mixolydian scale is the proper scale for that one. And the D Mixolydian scale has an F sharp. All other notes are natural. Now remember, I told you that the 7 is C, the 8 is D, so I'm going to put a C sharp between the C and the D. So when I play it up to tempo, I guess I should have said when I play it in rhythm, with better rhythm, because any tempo can be up to tempo. Now, our 1 chord in the G major 2-5-1, of course, is G major scale. On major scales, the passing tone comes between the 5th and 6th tones. So if I count up the G major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I find that I've got D, and 6 is E, so I'm going to put a D sharp between the D and the E. Okay, so now that's your Dorian bebop scale, your Mixolydian bebop scale, and your major bebop scale in accordance with a 2-5-1 in the key of G major. Now, I've got a little exercise for you. Oh, and by the way, let me just take a moment and tell you that If you want to learn more about bebop scales, how they can be used with other bebop components like enclosures and such, be sure to check out my lesson called Soloing on Tunes, Scrapple from the Apple, because I really take you through a lot of exercises in that lesson that'll help you learn how to incorporate these bebop scales. Okay, now the exercise that I'm going to show you, let's just use the D Mixolydian bebop scale, since that may be the one that you're already most familiar with. So I'm going to play the Mixolydian bebop scale starting on the root on D. So I played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, passing tone to the 8. Now I'm going to start on the third, because remember I told you we can start on any chord tone, and if we're playing 8th notes or 16th notes, each of the downbeats will be a chord tone. So I'm going to just start on the third, and I'm going to play from third to third. So I'm going to play from low F sharp to F sharp, an octave above that, and I'm going to still use the same passing tone, the C sharp. So I'm starting on F sharp. So every downbeat, F sharp, G, A, B, C, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, each of those notes falls on a downbeat. Now I'm going to start on the A, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to play A to A, 5 to 5, and I'm going to have the passing tone again between the C and the D. So I landed on A, right on the downbeat, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Going to do the same thing starting on C. Now, we can do the same exercise descending. I'm going to start on the 7th, which is C, the high C. I'm going to descend to the middle C, and remember I'm going to put the passing tone, the C sharp, between the D and the C. Now I'm going to play from high 5 to middle 5, high A to middle A, still with the passing tone in there. From 3 to 3, F sharp to F sharp with the passing tone in there. And D to D, 8 to 1, passing tone in there. So here's the whole exercise. Now, you could do that exercise on the Dorian bebop scale as well. Start on the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. If you do it on the major bebop scale, you would start on the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 6th, not the 7, because if you start on the 7, you don't end up with all of your downbeats being chord tones. So if you start on the 6, and keep in mind that pianists most often include the 6 in a voicing for a major chord, so it's still part of the major chord. So there's a great exercise for you. Now remember, I've got a lesson called Soloing on Tunes, Scrapple from the Apple. It's based on Charlie Parker's Scrapple from the Apple changes, and it really goes through all of these bebop concepts. Well, maybe not all of the bebop concepts, but really works thoroughly with bebop scales and chromatic enclosures, so that you can learn how to work these together, work enclosures with your bebop scale to make some really neat bebop scale lines. There's one. So there I've got an enclosure and a bebop scale line, just as an example. Okay, be sure to drop me a note if you run into any questions.